for quite a long time, and now has had a position at the University of the Witwatersrand, and now is head of the journalism department with film and television at the University of Johannesburg, in Johannesburg. We have known Dumisani for a long time because he's also worked for OSISA and been a grant maker. So it's been interesting to have Dumisani both as the person who dispenses money to us and the person on the other side working with us as an academic. Dumisani has a wide range of knowledge about the African situation. He's very interested in radio and knows a lot about policy. And he's going to speak to us today. So I'm handing over to you. Thank you for being here, Dumisani.
Thank you so much, Anthea. I'm so pleased to be here. I know you've been here for 2 days now, and day 3 must be quite a stretch as a conference. I'm pleased to talk today about the topic of fake news, which is quite a vexed topic, and I'm sure it's a topic that we've been touching upon in the last 2 days. I'm no expert in the area as such, but it's an area that I think all of us are becoming a lot more interested in because of the different ramifications of fake news to all of us. So I'll basically read my paper. Well, more than just a second. While the more recent public and scholarly debates on fake news have largely been attributed to the popularization of the concept by Donald Trump, there is consensus within the growing body of scholarship on this topic that it is not an entirely new concept. In fact, evidence abounds that the term fake news has been used for many years prior to its more widespread use in recent years. Its more common usage just before this tsunami was in reference to political satire in mock news shows such as The Daily Show, Comedy Central in the US. Recent fake news studies have largely focused on its rapid proliferation, which many have linked to social media, and how it has become a serious threat to democratic processes and the social fabric in general. Most of these studies have tended to focus on the fake news phenomenon in Western societies, and in particular on the technical aspects that have driven its spreading and the alleged Russian interference to subvert democratic processes in the UK, in the US, in France, in Germany. While its global dimension is widely acknowledged, there have been far fewer studies on fake news in the global south. For that reason, I will deliberately use 4 local examples in this presentation, even though I know this is a very global audience. Several analysts have attempted to proffer a working definition of fake news, with the result that we probably have as many definitions of the concept as we have analysts. Such is the complexity of this seemingly universally understood concept. It underscores the fact that not all fake news is the same, be it in terms of how it is produced, who produces it, and with what intent, or how it is distributed and ultimately consumed. Further, it points to the need for making a distinction between different forms of fake news, notably between what could be called misinformation and disinformation. A working definition of fake news should attempt to cover a whole range of things, including the above. Brian McNair, for instance, defines fake news as intentional disinformation, invention, which entails invention or falsification of non-facts for political and commercial purposes. So most of the definitions that have been proffered center around intentionality of the fake news and largely centering on commercial and political or ideological interests. The explosion of fake news in recent years has been closely linked to the rise of digital technologies that allow individuals to create news, real or fake, and spread it rapidly across social media platforms. The speed and reach of fake news in the digital era means that fake news often travels faster than real or truthful news. As an African saying goes, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Often, by the time fake news is detected, reported, and taken down, a lot of irreversible damage has been done. On January 9, 2018, as South African President Jacob Zuma was under immense pressure to leave office, a South African clickbait website calling itself allafricanews.co.za, which was mimicking the African news website allafrica.com, made the shocking announcement that President Zuma had resigned and had been replaced by his so-called market-friendly deputy president, now President Cyril Ramaphosa. This temporarily caused the South African rand to go on to spike before falling and later stabilizing after it emerged that this was after all a hoax. But this story had gone viral before it had been debunked, likely influencing trade on the stock markets. And this is one of many examples of the damaging effects of fake news. What is particularly unsettling about all this is the increasing sophistication of embedded technologies that have the capacity not only to collect and store user information on social media, but also to use it to generate personal profiles that allow informed targeting of individual accounts for information distribution. As Martin Hurst points out, quote, the ease with which algorithmic bots can be established to mimic human social media accounts creates a low-cost and effective means to disseminate information virally, whether it is reliable or not. Once bots have initiated the release of information, this can be easily amplified through friend networks. So sophisticated are these algorithmic processes that users hardly notice that the information that pops up on their social networking sites has been carefully selected for them by machines based on their previous browsing experience, as well as the interests of like-minded users within their networks. This creates what is now come to be known as echo chambers and filter bubbles that insulate social media users from contrary or alternative perspectives. As Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg reacted to Facebook censorship of a famous image from the Vietnam War said, already Facebook and other media outlets algorithms narrow the range of content one sees based on past preferences and interests. This limits the kind of stories one sees. We run the risk of creating parallel societies in which some people are not aware of the real issues facing the world, and this is only exacerbated by such editorial oversight. As we move forward towards a more automated world, this is not a responsibility that should be surrendered to machines only, end of quote. The development of bots and algorithms with the capacity to mimic human natural language on social media means that the production and dissemination of information online, whether real or fake, can now be automated. This has serious implications for public discourse and social stability in general, as it allows machines to
No, it's fake.
It's fake. Okay. I'll take that. This has serious implications for public discourse and social stability in general, as it allows machines to predetermine the everyday news we are going to access. It brings to the fore ethical dilemmas that come with the so-called artificial intelligence in the fourth industrial revolution. The increased use of clickbait headlines has also become a highly effective way of spreading fake news, as users are quick to endorse and share content merely from reading headlines. As the UNESCO recent study on trends and developments in media points out, the business model pursued by social networking platforms and search engines encourages the production of information that is click-worthy, independently of its accuracy and public interest. This dynamic has been exploited by groups of individuals who are producing hoax articles, attracting millions of clicks and shares, which can be turned into revenues through services such as Google AdSense. Research shows that companies that place adverts online are not concerned about the quality of content on these sites, as long as they meet minimum criteria such as not having pornographic content or being bot-generated content. The ordinary social media user is oblivious to this business model and to the fact that he or she is the traded value in this transaction. This is part of the economics of fake news, which psychologically exploits online users' confirmation bias as well as cognitive bias for purposes of increasing clicks and making more ad money. This makes users rely on friends' recommendations and reputation of authors for making decisions on the authenticity of the stories that they read. Armed with this knowledge, fake news suppliers are able to get their fabricated stories go viral, often far more rapidly than truthful stories. Internet giants such as Google and Facebook have been heavily criticized for pursuing business models that impoverish traditional mainstream media by exploiting news through use of stealth technology, while they have little, if any, understanding of or regard for the public purpose of journalism. Their growing power has meant that these online conglomerates have the capacity to control public discourse on a scale never imagined before. As Andreas Vittel makes this point poignantly by saying that in the age of mass media, the issue of ownership of means of production was only relevant with respect to media content. In the age of distributed media, which is also social media, the issue of ownership of means of production is relevant with respect to content, but also with respect to connectivity. This is not just about ideology and manipulation of messages anymore, but also about the ownership of infrastructure, of networks and platforms that allow users to socialize, communicate, and collaborate. This is not just about meaning and representation, it is about control of people's online interactions. It is ultimately about privileging certain forms of sociality and subjectivity. There are numerous examples of how these online giants have attempted to stifle freedom of expression, including policing cultural expression, as in the case of Facebook and Google, blocking Swazi Reed dance pictures on YouTube, and YouTube posts on account of what they perceived to be nudity and hence appropriate. Apparently, the Swazis do not consider exposing breasts as something sexual. An important point to stress is that fake news is big business, which makes the whole drive to eradicate it a near mission impossible. The Macedonian youths allegedly involved in subversion of US elections in 2026 earned as much as 16,000 for two pro-Trump websites, while those who produce fake news for Facebook earned as much as 10,000 a month from AdSense. In a country where average monthly income is as low as $371, fake news creation becomes a highly attractive economic activity for the unemployed youths. Strange as it might sound, it may not be too far-fetched to suggest that in the not-so-distant future, some desperate mainstream media will be building fake news into their business model mix to generate much-needed revenue. That is, if this is not already in practice. The Mail and Guardian recently interviewed a fake news website owner who confessed to running the website as a parallel revenue-generating venture to cross-subsidize his hotel and raping men. Interesting, the website owner suggested that he was inspired by the News 24 model, where tabloid Daily Sun is the money spinner in the stable. For this keynote presentation, I've been asked to address the question whether or not mainstream media capture and loss of credibility have given rise to fake news, and to explore possibilities of reclaiming the role and place of credible journalism in the post-truth era. The first part presupposes two things. First, that we are all in agreement that mainstream media have been captured, and by extension, that we agree who the captors are. And the second part presupposes that mainstream media have lost credibility. There's also a further presupposition that we agree that there is something called credible journalism, which also needs to be restored, and that we live in an era that is called post-truth. I'll start by addressing the question of capture and credibility loss of mainstream media before venturing into whether or not these two are causally linked and linked to the rise of fake news. The idea of mainstream media capture and then produce biased information in favor of capital or business elites. In the case of countries where state bureaucracies control the levers of power, the state monopoly media are believed to serve the interests of those dominant power elites at the expense of broader public interests. In short, we are talking about capture of mainstream media in the service of either business or political elites. Extending this logic further through their widely debated propaganda model, Herman and Chomsky have argued that this inequilibrium enables those with money and power to filter out news fit to print, marginalize dissent, and allow the government and dominant private interests to get their message across to the public. This process entails deliberate misinformation of the public as part of manufacturing consent, or what others have referred to as manufacturing, a metaphor of manufacturing. I want to argue that mainstream media have traditionally produced what one could call industrial or weapons-grade fake news, which they concealed and normalized through the small objectivity and professional news values. It takes the form of biases aligned to owners, business or political interests, and ideological biases that lead to the production of stories that privilege profits over people. It differs from modern-day fake news in the sense that industry or weapons-grade fake news is packaged as ideology aimed at shaping society's worldview over time, while most fake news peddled on social media is meant for immediate and specific effect. Based on the foregoing, depending on its ownership and context of operation, we can argue that mainstream media have always been captured and sources of a mix of truthful and untruthful news. What social media have simply done is to democratize the production and dissemination of fake news so that anyone who has a smartphone, internet access, some basic skills to produce and upload content, and a wicked mind has the potential to produce and share fake news. The instantaneous distribution of information means social media has given more legs to fake news. By lowering the cost of entry into the production and distribution of information, social media have also become closely associated with fake news, sometimes for the wrong reasons. In African countries, most mainstream media have always suffered a huge credibility deficit from the colonial through to the post-colonial era. In a context where mainstream media were predominantly owned by the state, these institutions largely served the interests of the government of the day at the expense of the majority populations. These state-controlled media were widely known to peddle untruths, propaganda, and to advance the interests of those in power. Take the battle over the hearts and minds in the so-called Rhodesian Civil War in the 70s, for instance, where the colonial regime made huge efforts to discredit freedom fighters through total fabrication of stories and framing freedom fighters as terrorists in the mainstream media. Or recent revelations of how the apartheid regime deliberately manufactured lies to discredit opponents through sophisticated means that included recruitment of journalists to produce damaging stories about those opponents in the mainstream media. Emerging details about how a covert unit known as Stratcom worked with some 40 journalists to discredit late liberation icon Winnie Mandela and create a wedge between her and the leadership of the ANC, and by extension between her and the wider South African public, is illustrative of the ever-present dangers of media capture that contributes to the production of weapons-grade fake news. In this context, various forms of alternative platforms of communication always emerge as sources of truth, including what Stephen Ellis has called pavement radio. But this is a topic for another day. By presenting views from the suburbs and excluding those of the people in the townships and rural areas, mainstream media in most African countries dismally fail the truth-telling test because their reporting purports to be national and public in character, when in fact it is limited to urban elites who make up their target markets. The conflation of publics and markets is also a deliberate way of deceiving media consumers into believing that the media cater for their interests, when in fact they are simply peddling what they call native advertising in the name of news copy. It is thus conceivable that those people sitting in the townships and rural areas and excluded from mainstream media have lost trust in and confidence in these media and can dismiss them as fake news. This loss of credibility could, to some extent, be fueling fake news, but it is important to point out that there has been no proof of direct causal relationships. And alongside the crisis in the media, we have witnessed in the recent years the eroding trust in institutions that society has traditionally put in high regard. As Brian McNay observes, the phenomenon of fake news is one expression of a wider crisis of trust in elites, including political and mainstream media elites, whose members are struggling to maintain their traditional roles in our liberal democracies. A recent report by American communications marketing firm Edelman points to significant decline in trust in four key pillars of society, namely government, non-governmental organizations, business, and the media in a number of countries across the world. Of the 6 countries with the extreme loss of trust across the 4 pillars, the United States is at the top with 37% loss, followed by Italy with 21% loss. South Africa shares the 3rd position with Brazil with 37% loss in trust, probably thanks to perceptions of widespread corruption and state capture during the final years of President Zuma's administration. With a decline of 14 percentage points from 47 to 33%, the Edelman barometer shows that only a third of Americans now trust their government. With specific reference to the media, trust levels in the US fell by 5% from 47 to 42%. That is for the period 2017 to 2018, which is considerably huge for a country generally regarded as a stable democracy. In announcing the findings, Richard Edelman, the head of the firm, noted that this is the first time that a massive drop in trust has not been linked to a pressing economic issue or catastrophe like Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster. In fact, it is the ultimate irony that it is happening at a time of prosperity with the stock market and employment rates in the US at record high. In South Africa, trust levels in the media fell by 4% from 39 to 35% over the same period, while trust in government fell by a percentage point from an already low 15% to 14%. And South Africa posed the lowest in the 2021 surveyed markets. While the loss in trust in business and business elites has been closely linked to the global financial crisis, more recent losses are linked to the credibility issues relating to public relations firms that have been exposed for gross ethical transgressions and for cooking books. This includes KPMG, McKinsey, Steinhoff, and Bell Pottinger. The story of Bell Pottinger, I think, is quite interesting for our case, given the impact it had and the fact that it included a lot to do with fake news. Bell Pottinger's case is worth some discussion as it is classic example of manufacture and distribution of weapons-grade fake news in South Africa, but with global implications. The role played by this firm in propping up the Gupta brothers, caught at the center of mass corruption and state capture in South Africa, is phenomenal. Using Twitter bots, several pro-Gupta websites, and 2 mainstream media outlets owned by the same Gupta brothers, and namely 24-hour news channel AM7 and daily newspaper New Page. Bell Pottinger mounted a sustained campaign to divert attention away from the besieged brand. Their strategy included working with a newly created pressure group, Blackfest Land First, which cranked up hate-filled rhetoric around radical economic transformation, and the eradication of white monopoly capital. It involved creation of over 100 fake Twitter accounts that all retweeted content from other Twitter accounts with hashtag white monopoly capitalism. In short, this campaign brought the racial discourse to entirely new levels that had not been witnessed before since the end of apartheid. I think what it illustrates is the power of fake news to appear authentic and even to set the national agenda. And as the UNESCO report points out, the power of fake news to masquerade as verified information and be shared widely is closely connected to its ability to offer information to a community of like-minded. I will try to just rush to the conclusion because the request was to talk about how we are going to reclaim the credibility of journalism. The challenge posed by this growing body of fake news analysts start exploring ways in which media can be defended and enhanced. So in which journalists can both defend and enhance the credibility of their profession in the face of rising fake news tsunami. This is not easy task given the growing ubiquity and instrumentalization of fake news. However, many have laid emphasis on the need for mainstream media to view the fake news tsunami more as an opportunity. Mainstream media should see the explosion of fake news as an opportunity to gain lost credibility by strengthening their ethical basis and enhancing their public perception as trusted sources of news. This would entail providing more rigorous investigative journalism with an enhanced culture of fact-checking and the media deliberately positioning themselves as trusted sources that provide information with context and background, as well as informed commentary, setting themselves apart from the fast-paced and unprocessed information churned out by social media. I will end there. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions because the tea time is now, and the next panel starts at 9:45, which is 7 minutes time to go. But I'm sure they can start 5 minutes late. No, take your tea very, very quickly and come back. And then I'm sure it is also on fake news. So if there are questions, and Dumisani, you're here. Dumisani, are you here for the next panel? Yes. So if there are questions that arise out of his presentation, they can be raised in the next session. Thank you so much.
It's the bit. It's a background. I think we want to take you want to take for us and then we take it together. But what are denying? There is no denial that status was existing that there were issues about it. Yes. But here
This is the same.
But it's safe.
Either it's platform what they are always beyond all these things. Far more than we want to
Yes, almost. You know, where were the challenging points? And then it was 2 years later.
This is something that one is relying more on. So it's coming out in the days and much analysis. I think that needs to be
That guy, I don't know. I have 40 journalists in my employ.
Yeah.
Not a single person has gone out. Those are the names of the I have that. I haven't seen anybody now. Hold on a minute. Is that these things I see is that it's yeah, prices going up. They
No, but it's
But there's stuff actually falling off the ceiling.
Oh, well.
And to suggest elements of the idea did just one of the interesting things elements of the
I actually B&B sort of up the road, and every morning they change the I got on the road. There's like the sweet spot, you know. So like between swim and work. But if you're on the road with the other guy, like 9.
Capture and trying to
yeah.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So I will
Actually, I was at a women in journalism conference in Kenya yesterday. So I spoke there, and then I had to, and then I came back and I got home after was 12.
all right.
So it was going to take a couple of days. Anyway.
it's fun. You need to provide.
Hello. How are you?
Good.
Like the piece on the new TV environment.
Thank you. It was the first person I found who read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, actually, and I actually stumbled across it because I get the film delivered to home, and I was leafing through it the other day, and I thought, how did I miss this? Because I mean, it is such a big topic.
Yeah, it made me quite worried because.
Yeah, that's it. Well, no, thank you.
Because.
Okay, cool.
Because.
So were you vegetarian?
I must say, it made me worry about the effect.
Why?
Because so few people in the industry read it. I mean, I can get a sense because, you know, I talk to people in the industry of what gets read and what isn't. And what struck me about that was that I went to meetings that week in the industry. And I thought, what is happening to the FS? It was always small. It was, I mean, it wasn't this small, but it always punched. It was always read by industry leaders. So I'm just saying that.
Yeah, actually, maybe we should actually give it another push on social and do like in case you missed it and kind of get it out there again, because I think it was really good. It was a good piece. So
Anyway,
this is a tiny little delegation. Most of whom I know already. We could have gone out to lunch.
let me grab a quick coffee.
Okay.
Keep on the yeah. People leave it. You can. Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be quite sensitive. Yeah, we need to figure out. So right now, yeah. There was one day I looked
Exactly. That's what
I've got a colleague who always, every time I say to him, I've had a great idea, and he says, what are we trying to say?
But that's exactly where I'm at. That's exactly. So, no, but that's exactly where I'm at. So how do I produce reports with lots of numbers that show things?
It's not helpful.
That's what I'm, so one of the things, I mean, I'm gonna start by sharing as well.
I think we're going to get started. It's 9:54.
Yeah.
I guess people still taking their tea break.
Back to 10.
We're trying to identify the other two speakers. They're taking the coffee break too, so just wait a little bit.
Yeah, it's precarious. We are.
Oh, let's just let's see. So
I want to speak, definitely. I want to know what happened. It's fine.
We'll start in 3 minutes.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
The other two.
We will start at 10 a.m. Okay, please be seated. We're going to get started. Good morning. My name is Sylvia Chan-Olmsted, and welcome to Plenary Session 7, the impact of fake news in our regions and our responses. We have 3 or 4, still waiting on one, wonderful panelists who will be sharing with you their perspective about the impact of fake news in our regions and responses. And we will have the panelists introduce themselves to give you a bit of context of the discussion.
Hi, everybody. Okay. My name is Lisa McLeod. I'm head of digital at TISO Blackstar, which is one of the largest media companies in South Africa, second to Naspers. We are involved in a variety of different kind of publishing arrangements. What I do primarily is run digital for TISO, although I have fingers in a lot of different pies and different industry bodies. I try and be as involved as I can in digital in South Africa as much as possible. So very briefly, head of digital at, it says Times Media Group. So before we were TISO Blackstar, we were Times Media Group up until about when I made this slide. So just a couple of months ago. I was formerly GM of digital publishing at 24.com, and prior to that, I spent 12 years at the Financial Times in London. So I had a very interesting, as you know, the FT is considered to be one of probably the foremost success story in terms of turning a print organization into a largely digital organization. I was actually there a couple of weeks ago. They now have 960,000 digital subscribers versus about 240,000 print subscribers. So this is one of the great success stories. I hope I had a small hand in it somewhere along the line. My focus is very much on newsroom integration and change management in an industry that is changing rapidly. I mean, the amount of change that has happened in the media industry over the last 20 years has actually turned it on its head, quite literally. And it's been a great privilege to be involved and to watch an industry change so much. I've included on my little CV the fact that I have an honours degree in anthropology. I actually wanted to be a journalist, but really my big love was anthropology. And I often say that, frankly, it's actually served me better because having such a keen interest in change management in the way organizations function under pressure, I've actually managed to indulge both of my passions. So I've had a very interesting life from that point of view. So TISO Blackstar, just a quick introduction. We publish 8 newspapers. We have a magazine division, about 14 websites, and a lot of radio holdings as well, which is a very interesting place to be in South Africa. I was looking at some stats yesterday. I mean, some of the biggest radio stations in South Africa has 7 million daily listeners. The next biggest is 5 million. Radio is huge in this country. So it's an interesting place to be and somewhere where we should be exploring synergies a lot more. We publish Business Live, Business Day, Financial Mail, Times Live. Times Live is the second biggest news site in South Africa, Sowetan Live, Dispatch and Herald, which are both our local sort of regional websites. And we've recently consulting group called Innovation Media to help us rethink some of the ways that we're working. And now that one of the things that they helped us to do was to move from one building to another. And I was actually at a Women in Media, a Women in Journalism conference in Kenya yesterday, which is why I haven't been here, and unfortunately I missed this conference. And a lot of the CEOs were there. And I was just saying to them that you can't really underestimate the importance of having the right space to work in a journalism environment. So having the right kind of equipment, having a very collaborative working environment, which is what we do now. We were previously in a building with lots of floors and lots of different levels, and actually that really contributes to the siloing of print versus digital versus one product and another, and actually moving into a big open floor. We did say the other day that the advantage of being in our new space is that people talk to each other all the time, and the disadvantage of our new space is that people talk to each other all the time because our rumours fly around at double the speed. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that just now as well. And we're now embarking on a complete overhaul of workflows and processes to favour a digital-first environment. So what we're trying to do is change all of the workflows, move them to becoming digital-first, that we're publishing on our digital platforms first. There's a very good reason for this. Our analytics show us that our audience online is now bigger than our audience in print. And we are actually servicing more people on our online platforms every day than we are on our print platforms, and therefore that requires a change in the way that we're thinking about what we do every day. So that's just a bit of context. So onto the topic of the day, which is fake news. Because I haven't been here, I don't know how heavily you've delved into this. So if you've been through all of this already, please forgive me. But I'm kind of coming to it cold, so I'm just going to run through some of it. I think the conundrum that we're facing for publishers in terms of the fake news environment is really about declining trust. And this is, I'm sure, something that you've spoken about a lot. But this is really becoming the big picture of news internationally. We have an online environment has basically created a very, very ripe environment for anybody to jump on the bandwagon and become publishers in one sort or another. In the early days of the internet, there was a huge proliferation of bloggers, citizen journalists, people just jumping onto platforms and publishing pretty much whatever they felt like. And that was a really big threat to the traditional news organizations, and clearly a threat, a great opportunity for people to have their voices heard. But it has created an environment where basically the landscape has largely been flattened, and for people who aren't discerning, may not actually understand the difference between something that actually comes from an accredited or verified news organization and somebody who has an opinion on something and is putting it out very loudly. Of course, social media has just added to the mix. So as print circulation has declined and newspapers have become almost less relevant from that perspective, we have added to the mix the social environment, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., and people just really believe what they read on social sites. So, I mean, this is something we could talk about all day long. I mean, in terms of filter bubbles, when you follow a certain group of people or you follow a list of people on Twitter, you're going to be fed almost exactly what you believe in. And the same thing happens on Facebook. When you follow groups or when you have a friend group and you follow what they are feeding you, you don't ever get out of that. And it's been a really, really interesting exercise. I actually went onto my Twitter account a little while ago and deliberately followed every single right-wing publication that I could find in America, basically every single entry to what I kind of believe in. I went and found the opposite and actually followed that. And it's terrified me so badly that I actually don't want to be on Twitter anymore, because I'm now actually seeing things from the other side and seeing what people are getting fed. There's actually a really, somebody did a really fantastic thing where they've accounts that he follows, and he follows a tiny number of people, okay? So the point is, I mean, when you're talking about a filter bubble, this is a really interesting exercise. You can actually see what the president is getting fed on Twitter every single day, that president, not our president. And it gives you some kind of indication of the type of the type of filter that he is seeing the world through, because of the followers that he the people he is following on Twitter. So this is creating a most unstable and really quite hostile situation for the press, particularly, because we have become completely polarized. This is an environment that is absolutely rampant with bots. There are lots of reasons for this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more a bit later as to why it is all happening. But basically, we're in an unprecedented time in history where there is actually a market for partisan news. So, I mean, this is precisely the opposite of what we all know and understand to be the true space that journalism is supposed to operate in. It is actually economically viable to produce partisan news because there's such a huge market for it. And I mean partisan news being produced by really, really big, extremely well-funded news organizations. So, for people looking for stuff that suits them, they are now out of the social environment and into a very formal media environment, and they are actually being fed deliberately partisan news, either left or right, but to actually remain central to that, to try and stay just and fair and focused and on the fence as much as possible, is actually not as economically viable as becoming a Breitbart, for example, or Fox News, or something the charts on some other side. So, what Fox News, or something the charts on some other side. So, what this does imply is that quality independent media is more important than it ever has been, and I think this is something that we all understand. How to reach people is a conundrum, because how to actually get there and get out in front of people is really, really what the conundrum is. So, all news organizations rely very, very heavily on Facebook for traffic, to get people to put their stories. Facebook has deliberately been depressing news feeds on Facebook in favor of personal engagement. And this has been going on for probably about the last month or so. I think we've seen a definite drop off in traffic, probably somewhere under about 10%, but speaking to a lot of international colleagues, and some of them have seen up to 30% drop of traffic referrals to their sites, because Facebook is actually pushing down the formal news agencies in favor of personal sharing and likes, etc., etc. So, I mean, if you haven't done it already, it really is worth doing some reading on the Facebook algorithms, how they work, why they work the way they do, and the impact on publishers, because I think that's another whole session. So, could do that as well. So where did fake news come from? So it was first coined by Hillary Clinton, actually, when she was discussing the Pizzagate scandal. So I don't know if you can remember this, but basically this was put out on social media that Hillary Clinton was running a child sex ring from a pizza shop somewhere, I can't even remember where it was in America. Oh yes, that's right. And some person took this extremely seriously and actually arrived at that pizza shop armed with an assault rifle to try and break up the child sex ring that Hillary Clinton was running. And this is really where the term fake news came from. I mean, this actually resulted in like a really, really serious situation. And she called it fake news. I mean, that's exactly what it was. It was fake news. Hillary Clinton is not running a child sex ring, for those of you who are wondering. And a little while later, Trump jumped on the bandwagon and called a CNN reporter fake news reporter, and so it took off, and thus began this phenomenon that has become known as fake news. So, when I mean, the title of what I called it was the post-truth era. Lying has become quite normal for politicians. It's become quite normal for public officials. People can get away with it if you say it loudly enough, if you say it often enough, and if you get some of the news organizations to follow you and agree that what you're saying is actually the truth, then it becomes the truth. It's as simple as that. So, I mean, Putin has blatantly denied that they ever sent tanks into the Ukraine, into the Crimea. They actually did. They were there at the time. It's been proven. We've had Duterte doing some very similar things in the Philippines. Trump goes without saying. So, and social media sites have made this very, very easy because, again, I mean, people are gripping onto things that they believe in and they're perpetuating those myths and want to believe it, and therefore it just gets sent and goes viral. And this is what is referred to as the weaponization of social media. So I'm taking this actually from a presentation that I heard 2 weeks ago at the Financial Times. They had a syndication conference, and you know, I think this is some Pew research, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't get the credit for it, but false news actually travels faster than true news. I mean, it actually has been proven to get from point A to B significantly faster than true news does, because it's a little bit more exciting, maybe, who knows, but people definitely prefer it. And the fastest of the false news is politically motivated news. So, you know, there's really, really a market in this environment. An interesting question as well is everybody's terribly focused on Facebook and what Facebook has done for, you know, sort of slanting elections and pushing people in one direction or another. But actually WhatsApp in a way is a bigger question. I mean, everything that happens and gets shared in the WhatsApp environment is encrypted. It's completely locked down. So there's no way for Facebook, who owns WhatsApp, by the way, to police anything that happens in that environment. So once something moves from a social environment into a WhatsApp environment, the legs that it gains there and the speed at which it travels and the number of people it reaches completely, it's opaque. We have absolutely no idea. So we have no idea of the impact. And I mean, just as an example there, I mean, there are 200 million users of WhatsApp in India alone. And, you know, I mean, it's a known fact that's becoming really, really problematic in the Indian environment, particularly now that they're having some hotly contested elections. The news travels at the speed of light, and it's traveling in an environment where analysts can't actually see it. Social media analysts have no idea what's actually being said, and it's all locked down in an encrypted environment. So, fake news South Africa. I mean, there are hundreds of academic definitions of what fake news actually is and what it means. I mean, I'm going to just give two, because for us, these are the two that we are really grappling with as an organization, as a mainstream media organization in this country. One is the rerouting of traffic to false domains, and that basically means that if I have a site called Times Live, somebody will set up a site called Times Live with an S on the end, for example, or change one of the letters to something quite similar. Or so basically what they're trying to do is when somebody is looking for one of the mainstream sites, they're rerouting traffic onto a spoof site of some description and gathering the clicks on that site. And the other way is to spread propaganda and control political debates, and especially, and this is where this really lives very well, is in inflammatory binary political environments. So Dumisani did a lovely talk just now and spoke very much about the proliferation of fake news sites during the Gupta and Zuma debacle over the last year and a half. There's been an unprecedented amount of fake news sites that sprung up virtually overnight. Fake Facebook and Twitter accounts, egg accounts, they're called egg accounts because on Twitter it's like the faceless accounts, so they look like little eggs, they've got like a little oval on them, they've no actual face. So automatically generated accounts that are put into play by bots, and what their job is to follow accounts that have been set up by people perpetrating propaganda, and then retweet that propaganda hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So I mean, a lot of research has been done into this, and Andrew Fraser was very involved. He did an amazing piece for the Daily Maverick, a huge amount of research into it, and actually plotted all of the bot nests that were spreading all of the propaganda on Twitter. And Twitter actually came to the party and closed them down eventually, but it took a long time to actually pinpoint who they were and what they were doing and move through them. But the point of this really, beyond the fake propaganda side of things, the point of rerouting traffic, trying to get it onto other people's sites, trying to get it onto spoof sites, is because it's big business. Okay, so if you can spoof a site and get a lookalike audience for something that an advertiser is interested in, you can make quite a lot of money on this. And one of the things I was reading on the plane yesterday, one of the reports that was done, I think it was actually done by Bits, I think it might have been in the State of the Newsroom report. One of your researchers actually went and interviewed a click farmer, basically, somebody who's running a click farm. Can you imagine? I mean, this is a career for people these days. But he's running a whole series of fake news sites to actually just try and get it. And he's making between 60,000 and 250,000 in a month, depending on how much false traffic he can actually draw in based on these sites. So I mean, there's a real art to it. I mean, these are the dark arts of the web, and it's a real problem. 20%, up to 20% of ad impressions on the web may actually be fake. People are paying for ads that are actually being run on fake accounts. So this is, it's not serving advertisers, it's not serving readers. What it's serving is a very small group of people who are actually making money out of it. And this doesn't only apply to text. I mean, we even had a fake Sapiro cartoon sometime over the past year and a half. Fake videos, fake ads, fake pictures, people spoofing Nando's ads, all kinds of things. So people are jumping onto brands and actually destroying brands in the process as well. I mean, MyWay was a victim of this, where somebody actually faked a MyWay email. I think it's going to take them forever to recover from this particular little scandal. Okay, so what are we doing as a company? I mean, we've taken this very seriously. I can assure you. I mean, it's a terribly dangerous environment to be working in for journalists, because, I mean, our credibility really depends on us being able to tell the difference between something that is fake and something that's not. And our readers depend on us to be able to tell the difference, and what we feed back to them that is coming out of a social environment, or coming from sources, or coming from other websites, we have to actually be able to verify and ensure that it's true. So, I mean, we went to a lot of trouble to assess our own risk profile, and this was in the wake of the HuffPo blog case. We've educated our staff to be very aware of fake accounts and to stand up sources very carefully. So if we find something on social media, that will be put through a normal reporting procedure. As my old editor at the FT always used to say, it's better to be right than first. Okay, so we're trying to push that principle, rather be right. If we are not first to the party, that's actually all right. But preferably what we want to do is make sure that we're actually correct. We have a WhatsApp group with about 170 editors and reporters from around the country on it. And that's actually been incredibly useful. I mean, we use that for breaking news. So if something comes in, if a statement comes in, if somebody hears something, we pop it onto the WhatsApp group. But it's been very, very helpful in debunking things as well. So what people will do is put it out to that group and say, I've just seen this on social, and immediately 4 people will jump on it and say, no, it's fake. Okay, it's already been discredited, or whatever the case is. And so that's like a very, very fast and instant way of actually making sure that we check, it's a check and balance within our own organization, but it's happening in a very instant way. So as I said, rigorous sourcing. What confuses the issue, actually, it's a very interesting situation in this country, is that our public officials use their Twitter accounts to make statements about things, and that can be very confusing. So, I mean, we have actually sat sometimes with 4 or 5 opposing statements that have either come on WhatsApp groups or on Twitter, where you've got the Minister of Mbalule Fikile, saying one thing on his personal feed on Twitter, the ministry is denying it on another hand, the president kind of confirming on this, we've got something from the presidency and something, and that is quite a difficult environment to work in. So we're actually trying to figure out who to believe when it comes down to it, because sometimes people are off on their own tangent and off on their own agendas, they're jumping the gun, and waiting for official confirmation can push us way down the queue in terms of publishing, because we're confused. We actually don't know what's going on. So that is not really helpful. I mean, I think these ministers are using Twitter to build their own profiles, and it can be quite helpful to them in a personal sense, accessibility and down with the people and all that kind of stuff, but actually not really helpful in terms of putting forward the official line in an official way that we all know how to handle. We're lucky in that we don't rely on user-generated blogs to any great degree, or user-generated content. So almost every within the organization, except for our comments, which we moderate quite carefully. Could be better sometimes, but we do. And very, very early on, in fact, when I first arrived at what was then Times Media 3 years ago, I got rid of Outbrain immediately. So Outbrain and Taboola are two selections of stories for you to go and click on, so that you go to other parts of the web. So it's a kind of, you'll never believe what this woman got up to. Here's this is the freakiest cow that's ever been born with 2 heads or something like that. I mean, it's like really, really weird stuff. And a lot of the sites that they refer to, and then the way you make your money is that your readers come onto your site, they click through those links which are by Taboola, and then Outbrain and Taboola pay you a portion of revenue for the clicks that go through to those sites. So it's like a little ecosystem of content referral. And I mean, I just called it, we said, no, we're not running this on our sites because it was just junk. And it was referring out to ridiculous stories, had nothing to do with South Africa. They were just like clickbaity, yucky stuff. And I just didn't really think it fitted with the profile of what I wanted to do on our site. So we got rid of that. And that was a lot of revenue gone. I mean, that's quite a few $100,000 a month, which is a lot of revenue in the digital business. But we worked with another provider who is now providing links to our own stories. So we're doing lateral links to our own sites within our own ecosystem. And that has worked much better. Revenue has come up again as well. So it took a little while, but I think it's definitely worth it. So Outbrain markets and works in fakey kind of lowbrow news, which is not really good. They are, however, completely ubiquitous. I mean, just about every site they click on in the world will have either Outbrain or Taboola powering the bottom of their articles. And then tech. So we really did a lot of work in terms of rebuilding our tech stack. So all of our sites are now HTTPS compliant. So that's just a security service that is actually built into our new web stack, and it helps prevent hacking, break-ins. I mean, hacking of news organizations' websites is very prevalent everywhere else in the world. I haven't really seen it happening, touch wood, in South Africa, but it is very, very prevalent everywhere else in the world, and it is something to be careful of because it's a big threat to the brand, and you've got a lot of reach. So if somebody does hack your site, it's not a good place to be in. And we've done all of that with a new CMS called Cosmos, which is entirely open sourced, web-based. And the advantage of that is it means that our web publishers can actually just check things on the fly as well. So they can actually do reverse searches on Google for images, verify stuff. It's all built into our web CMS, so they're not jumping from one system to another, which is extremely helpful. I'm nearly done. This is I think the end of my time. The domains are a slightly different story. I mean, I put in a hefty budget every single year just to find domain spotters and to make sure that people are not sitting on our domains or on domains that are very similar to us. And we spent a lot of money on this. I mean, we do cease and desist letters virtually weekly to people who have taken domains that are infringing on our copyright. I mean, people do this for ransom, basically. So they take the site knowing that either we're going to spin something up. So, for example, all my sites have got live at the end, or a lot of them have live at the end of them. So people, domain spotters will take things like sports live, entertainment live, thinking ahead to what I might decide to do in the future. And then they will sit on those sites and then demand money for me to buy them back. So that's it very much squarely sitting on our brands and using the brands for whatever they want. And some of them are a lot more sticky than others. Some of them will not work. I mean, I know these guys by name because, I mean, I can see who's registered the sites. So we send cease and desist letters. That doesn't really work. Then we actually start a cycle notice, which is the South African Institute of Intellectual Property Law. And then we, and those notices can probably be up to 30,000 Rand every single time we do that. But we're trying to be quite aggressive about it because what we don't want is for people to think that we're a weak link and that they can come in and actually just take our sites. And then in addition to that, we also, a digital managing editor, Rian Vormrans, and I are both sitting on an international committee formed through Ryan EFRA, and I'm on the board of the World Editors Forum, to actually petition Facebook about verifying publishers in a better way on Facebook. Because we are kind of in the mix with every random group, and there isn't really a very good way of telling the difference between a verified bona fide publisher and somebody else. So Mark on the IAB, we have also petitioned Facebook in South Africa. We've had less kind of cooperation on that front, but we're also trying from an international level to try and go forward and say, can you please give us a bit of a shot here so that we can compete in this environment a little bit better. At the same time, I think a lot of publishers are just kind of starting to move away from Facebook and go for organic reach instead, trying to get as much reach as they can off their own sites and not rely on Facebook. I mean, building a business on somebody else's platform is not a good idea, as they say. So we are bearing that in mind. Okay, very quickly, some benefits. I'm sure you've all heard of the Trump bump. Okay, so when Trump came into power, the one thing about what Trump has done is that it has forced a retreat to quality journalism. I mean, people are definitely trying to find the truth in this post-truth world, and so are leaning very heavily on the New York Times, on the Washington Post, on these really, really big paywall sites that are staffing excellent newsrooms, and they are, making good money out of it. So, I mean, when after Trump became president and started speaking about the failing New York Times over and over and over again, Amazon's Washington Post, the failing New York Times, all of crooked Hillary Clinton, all of these stuff, people started signing up to the New York Times in droves. I mean, they had about a 30 or 40% spike in subscriptions, highest subs ever, and then people were retweeting him with a photograph of their invoice from the New York Times where they had subscribed to it. So it must have driven him completely crazy. But I mean, basically, it drove the New York Times to an all-time high in terms of subscriptions. So we launched Business Live, which is our paywall product, into this environment. It's 4 business sites all together, and we put a paywall on it. And we're very much focused on providing quality news in a time of distress. The week after Trump became president, this was our advertising campaign. Let me just show you, that's Business Live. And this was our campaign. We decided to, as I said, cash in on Lightgeist at the moment and did some cheeky Nando style advertising. So that was the campaign we ran in the papers. And then I'm not going to leave it up there because I don't want this on Twitter again. And then we got into trouble on Twitter for being insensitive. So we did some slightly less inflammatory advertising, and that's the campaign that we ran with. So really focusing quite heavily on, yes, we are running a paywall, but what we're trying to do is actually bring you the best possible journalism that we can. That costs money. That's what we're aiming at. And then we did a couple of others on the Rand as well. But the Rand may be junk, but your news needn't be. That kind of thing. So we're running a very successful paywall in this environment, which I'm happy about. We are also looking at putting up paid content products on a couple of our other sites. There's a lot of pushback about paywalls, but I was at a conference in Berlin probably about a month ago, and it was really fascinating to me. I mean, the overwhelming majority of publishers are paywalling in some way. They are moving towards paid content in some way. It is a very simple equation. We cannot survive on digital advertising alone. Print circulation is declining. We want to carry on producing journalism. People are consuming it on the web. We need a cover price. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, we charge a cover price for news, and what we're trying to do is to find lots of alternative ways of getting people to pay for news. It might not be hard cash even. There's a lot of work being done on attention-based advertising where you're compelled to look at an advert for 10 seconds before you pass to the news, for example, to unlock a story. So there are lots of ways and means of doing it, but that is something that we are looking at very, very hard. And that is the end for me. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
We have a Q&A.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for that very insightful presentation. Our next panelist, Mr. Caleb Chilke, Senior Specialist of Peace Tech Lab Africa.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful presentation. Because I'm seeing a lot of the things that you're talking about is some of the things we encounter in our work. So my name is Caleb Chilke, and I work with the Peace Tech Lab, which is a non-governmental peace-building organization. So we look at media, data, and technology in conflict countries and try to see how we can work with those platforms to promote peace. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to take you on a slightly different direction. Because our work focuses on peace building. So we've been looking at how cases of fake news, what we call now dodgy news, misinformation, how it has led into violence or conflict in different parts of Africa. So I'm going to look at 2 countries, South Sudan and Kenya, and just give you qualitative examples of what we've been seeing around these issues and how they've been playing out on social media, things like that. So quick background on Sudan. There's independence in 2012, then there was conflict in 2013, and then there was a peace process in 2015, which broke down in 2016, and the country just is now in this debate of trying to have a peace process that has always been challenging up to date. So what we did during this period is we set up to start a radio program, a radio drama. So we had based on some of the experiences that people are going through in the country. So this the country's popularity, the major population is youth. So we were trying to model the radio drama around some of the experiences that some of the child soldiers have gone through, some of the victims have gone through. So, and then we also had an educative kind of content in that radio drama. So we had sort of an edutainment program. So the thematic areas we were looking at were things like gender equality, national identity, peace and tolerance. So we're trying to make it such that the youth would be able to listen to something that they could relate to and also engage. So we came up with a program called Sawa Shabab, which means Youth Together in Arabic. And the idea behind this, again, is just to have, just a voice where youth would be able to engage and hear some of the, examples of experiences that other youth answer through SMS or call-in. So we'd ask them, let's say, for example, the episode is talking about a young guy who's looking for a job, but then cannot be employed because he doesn't really belong in, one tribe or the other, and needs to pay a bribe. So the question would be something like, should this person pay a bribe, or what should the person do? And then people were able to text in, call in. It was going well. We had, listenership was going. 10,000 people in South Sudan, in a post-conflict country. It was doing well. And then we decided now to venture into Facebook. So this is where now all the issues are coming up. So we had maximum engagement. People were able to even talk about other issues that we did not cover on the radio program. However, after we ventured into Facebook, we started realizing some new content that we could not really understand. So at one point, people are talking about, oh yeah, well, we need a peaceful country. But then we started getting some coded languages. So we went back to a team. We asked them, what is this type of coded language? What does it mean? And they told us this is hate speech. This is what our community say when they want to target people for mass killings and things like that. And it's not finding its way onto our platform. So what do we do? Because this is supposed to be a peace building platform, but then we have content coming in, and we're wondering how did it get there. So these are some of the headlines that were circulating during that time on media organizations saying that hate speech is basically go back and ask yourselves how is this hate speech presenting itself? What are some of the organizations that are sort of countering the hate speech on social media? What are they doing? How are they seeing this type of content? So what we did is we developed a lexicon of hate terms, okay? Because we realized that there's a lot of coded languages. And I'll give you an example. So we work with different organizations in South Sudan, we work with the communities, and we developed this lexicon. It's on our website, you can have a look. And the idea was to be able to give them a tool that they could use when countering this type of content. And I'll just give you a list. This is just a basic list of some of the terms, very short listed. I haven't done justice in explaining them, but if you can see the first term, MTN. For the South Africans in the room, MTN is a service provider in South Africa, and it's considered as a hate term in South Sudan. So the context is very different, and the reason is because MTN, the slogan for MTN is everywhere you go, right? So the largest group in South Sudan, the largest ethnic group in South Sudan are the Dinkas. So by the fact that the largest group in South Sudan, they're dispersed well around the country. So everywhere you went, you meet a Dinka. So people started calling them MTNs. Now it got to a point where, so when you see the message, you see, so somebody would say that, you see a message on social media saying that I need to delete all my MTN lines. So that would mean basically a targeted killing towards the ethnic tribe of the Dinkas. So as you can see, so some examples, somebody says we need to deal with the MTNs. And at one point, the rebel groups were stopping vans along the and pulling, going to the drivers and asking them, do you have any network in your van? And the driver would say, yeah, I have 2 MTNs. Then we pull out and shot on the road, and then the rest would be left to leave. So we started realizing a lot of coding of this type of content, because face value, you wouldn't think it is hateful. So what we did is, after we developed the lexicon, we went back on social media, we started trying to find out what is the type of, what are the other terms that are used around this content. So the term like MTN, what other, in what conversations is it being used? So as you can see, on the right side, the right cloud, word cloud, is content that is around peace building, and the left cloud is about hate content. This is basically content that is targeted toward other ethnic groups. So we also started looking at volumes. Where was this content appearing? When was it appearing? Who, at what time? What was the incidences? And then we went further to look at the platforms. And you can see under news platforms, we had 14% of this content. Facebook was by far the largest, but as you can see, the percentage is quite small because that was only the public content that we were looking at. And then we also started looking at networks. Who was spreading the content? Where were they? Who was in their networks? And we started realizing that these were very interconnected because we had also media platforms spreading their content from personal bloggers. So it was, we started trying to now create this map of where, who is doing it, when are they doing it, on which platform are they doing it. And we realized that a lot of these guys are from the diaspora. This is South Sudan. People had left during the conflict. Now they've come in the travel to the US, Canada, Europe, and all that. So they had all these sophisticated platforms. They were able to, just go ahead and send automated messages at any given time to the public in South Sudan. And this is now where, it dawned on us that at every given time where there was a flurry of hate term, there was also a situation like there was a presence of fake news, misinformed news. And the way it takes part, the way it appears in South Sudan is quite interesting. I'll give you an example. This is a picture. Most of you guys who have done conflict journalism in Africa maybe have seen this picture. So this picture was being circulated. It appeared on news sites where WhatsApp, like what was mentioned, you'd find somebody sending you this in WhatsApp and asking if I've seen this. Somebody, even the caption itself says, please pray for South Sudan, this picture needs no explaining. But a Google search, just image reverse search, shows you that this image is actually in Rwanda in 1994. This is a child whose dad died from cholera in a refugee camp. But somebody was using it to show that this is happening in South Sudan. And it was evoking a lot of emotions. The people are then commenting with a lot of hate. So we started realizing causality where a lot of the hate content, so we had started looking at the hate instead of the fake. So it was more the fake that was leading on to the hate. This is another example, troops, UN troops, as you can see, with a couple of, I think, refugees moving in and out of images posted. The content starts very hateful and then it continues, it spirals, it goes completely haywire. And then research shows you that this was done by The Economist, and this was in actually 2015, this was happening in Congo, and it wasn't happening in South Sudan. So people are lifting pictures from already established violent situated conflict countries. If you're not doing your research, you're going to easily fall prey to it. There's another picture as well. This has also been doing trends. Social media, WhatsApp, Facebook. Again, picture says that these, I think, are children who are dying, and talks about, we need to revenge. And then a further, just verification of this image shows that this was happening in Nigeria in 1964 during the Biafran War. So pictures were being moved around different platforms, different reports, and people are being told that this is actually happening in the country at this given time. So this now, in 2017, what we decided to do is to look at the Kenyan situation, because we were going through an election. We said, might this be the same case happening in Kenya? Is there a situation where we're seeing a lot of hate speech? Not really sure whether it's linked to fake news. And not without any surprise, we saw a couple of content. So there was a rumor that was spreading in Kenya that the government had armed a militia group, and it was using the militia group to attack people who were demonstrating on the streets and fire live bullets, because the police could not do that. So the government had to hire a militia group. This militia group was called Mungiki. Mungiki is a militia group in Kenya. The signature is long dreadlocks, they smoke marijuana, and but quick study search to check that that's an image that has been photoshopped. This is in Kenya. We have more tech. People are able now to sit around and play with. So it's not just about lifting images, but it's lifting and altering the images such that they're pushing out an agenda and saying that this is what the government is doing. The government has armed a militia group. And this was actually a picture taken by Newsweek in 2015, talking about the way the Kenyan government was trying to defend its borders from radical Islamist groups, groups. Again, we see another picture. This is not really a picture, it's a document. So it wasn't just around pictures, it was also on documentation. This is a cable that was leaked from the US Embassy in Nairobi. So apparently the cable was saying that the government, was supporting the incumbent, and that if the country voted for the for the opposition, then the country would fall into conflict and the US government would withdraw its support from the country. So again, you see a lot of tampering of content, and US embassy came out very boldly, put out that picture and said that was a fake. And it put it on Twitter. It had to go on Twitter because it realized this is where the conversation was happening. It didn't reach out to the media organizations in Kenya to tell them this is actually a fake, so put out a word out. But they went to the same platform where the content was appearing. Again, so this didn't stop at fake documents. These are two websites from Ipsos. Ipsos, they do polling around elections and things like that. And a fake website was actually created during the election period. And as you can see, there's a picture that appears in both websites. So I think it's the guy that he looks like his mind appears in both images. And if you look at them just at face value, you wouldn't really recognize which one is real and which one is fake. And what these guys did when they developed the fake website, they put out poll results and they sent out the poll results to media newsrooms, and the media newsrooms actually started publishing this content. It's until the original news organization came out and said, these guys are not affiliated with us, this is not our website. And the About page, when you click on the fake one, the About page will take you to the real one. That was the only thing that was linking to the real one. So, but every other thing was fake. They had put out false polls, and then if you're very quick, you just go in and search. They had ipsoske.com, and the original one was ipsos.com. So very like what you just mentioned, where people play with domains. And the one on the right, the square one, is the fake one, and the rectangular one is the real one. So again, another picture that was shared by a blogger. This is a very popular blogger in Kenya, and he fell trapped into this. And he said that this picture, during this period, a kid had been killed during the riots, one of the riots, and then people were disputing and saying that this did not happen. So he put out the picture and he said this is actually happening, and this happened very, very recently. And people started, saying, yeah, it's true that the government is lying and the media organizations are not saying the truth. But we did, again, a reverse search. We saw that this was an image taken in 2007 in Kenya during the post-election violence. It won an award in 2009 in Japan, and people were circulating on social media. And it became very easy for just people to be duped and look at this content and say, oh, okay, this is happening now, so we need to act or we need to do something. So with all this information, what are we doing? We've learned that people fall very easily into these traps, and we're working with journalists, we're working with other organizations who are training journalists just to help them understand very basic things that they can do. This all comes down to media literacy. We went to Nigeria when we did a program with them again on hate speech and fake news, and we realized that a lot of them didn't even know how to use Google image search, just how to verify content, how to look at domains. It was very, very strange when we started showing them this. We started working with Facebook and Twitter because we realized that they have very reactive policies. People need to report content before it's taken down. So what we're telling guys is there are options. There's that option where you can report, but also we are training them on how to use data to have data journalism. So like we were just talking here, we were saying it's not a matter of really reducing the type of hate speech, the type of fake news that we are seeing, but it's a matter of creating more and more credible stories that people can actually now shift their focus onto. And looking at social media, we're able to collect a lot of data from social media and bring stories or create stories from such data. And moving forward, what we're trying to do is we're continuing the process in Kenya. We're also starting a process here in South Africa. So if you'd really love to collaborate and talk more about this, we're open to just hearing your opinions. And we're also looking to a way where that we can help journalists collect data that is useful to them and that can help them report, that can help them create stories, because we realize that people have, like we are saying, what we've been saying, people are now putting their own stories online on social media. So how can journalists collect stories as well, collect data, because maybe it's something that is new to journalists or media organizations where they don't have platforms that can enable them to analyze big data. So we're trying to work with them, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nixon, Carl Rigby, and Dr. Tendai. Okay, well, we have two wonderful panelists and two really insightful presentations. So,
You want to come?
Thank you. Either one of you could give comments to this, but one of my colleagues does fake news presentations throughout the state of Wyoming, and she's gotten wonderful feedback, but I don't know that she has gotten to both the business side that you talked about and the very peace side and hate speech side. What kinds of recommendations would you have to us as professional educators to educate the people in our states or regions or whatever, because what you're doing is magnificent, and I would love to give some hints to her.
Well, I mean, what age?
Wyoming, I was talking to Wyoming Press Association, and they talked to Sheridan High School students who thought that New York Times was fake news.
Yeah.
And so we have to start everywhere for everything, I think. But educating journalists is one of the things that she does, and then also just educating the population. I like what you said, basic things like do a Google search of the image, you know. I don't know if you have any specifics. So any age group, any hints you have, we'll take it.
So, I mean, there are lots of ways to, I mean, reverse image searching on Google is definitely a relatively easy thing to do. But I mean, in terms of actually a Hearts and Minds campaign about what time, and you know, and there has been a lot of research done about younger people really not being able to distinguish between fake and not news, and they live on social and they get fed news on social, so that definitely does make it a lot more difficult. I think that there are, I read yesterday something like, I mean, in South Africa alone, there was something, I thought, no, it wasn't in South Africa, I think just generally, I mean, there are literally now from about 37 fact-checking agencies about 5 years ago to literally in the thousands now. So, I mean, you know, I think the first thing is if it sounds too good to be true or sounds off ever so slightly, it's probably worth checking. And everything from political fact to they are, you know, I mean, Wikipedia will probably even be able to sort out the wheat from the chaff in some cases. But there are so many fact-checking organizations. Snopes.com does hoaxes. You can get, you know, you can get onto them. So maybe just find a list of those. That's a really good place to start, and then debunk stuff when it is. I mean, you know, there's a lot of self-regulation in terms of publishing, in terms of free publishing on the internet, in terms of what is fake and what isn't fake. But teaching that kind of thought process that distinguishes between something that's fake and not, what you consider something fake because it doesn't agree with your point of view, that is a significantly bigger hill to climb than actually understanding the difference between actual fake news and not.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think like what you said, the Google searches are very, very easy to do. We have stop, check, and reflect. When you collect information, when it comes to Facebook, does it have links? Just what are the hallmarks to check? And this is just for anyone on social media, not necessarily even just for journalists, but basically who's using the platforms. Where do you report such content? When it comes on Facebook, how do you report it on Facebook? If it comes to Twitter, how do you report it on Twitter? These are very basic things that anybody can do on the go. But looking at the way we've been working with journalists is we're also trying to tell them when you debunk content and you say, okay, this is fake, and we've actually realized it's fake, don't just, okay, then what do you do next? So do you just shove it on the side and then now start looking for the truth? Can you even just shed light on it and say, this has been identified to be fake? So anybody else looks at you now as the gatekeeper of the truth, in the sense that you're shedding the light on the ones who are trying to sort of turn the switch around. In Nigeria, we had a situation where different news shared a list of the platforms or accounts that they had linked them with fake news context in this list. So, but again, what we're just trying to encourage is a culture of now where, like Otto said earlier, it's not a race to break the news. It's a race to put out truthful news.
Any more questions?
Thanks. I want to raise an issue about the, firstly, just as a comment, around the example that you made of one of the ministers, of course, two accounts on this. On the other side, he says this as government. He says this profile. He, for me, a public servant should know that whatever you say, whether you are at the soccer stadium or what, you are a public servant. So one account, if you put a statement, it says, it talks to you as a public servant, you are a public figure. And I'm sure we can draw lessons from Trump himself. Whatever Trump says, we say it's the president that talks. No bit about but with the phenomenon of fake news, I don't know, but I can say that there is a strong movement from the NGOs, civil society, in a way counter fake news. But the question is, will that lead at some point to a stage where we need to find, say, as governments, a legislation on that? Could it ultimately lead to a legislation? Because others who are like your profiles of this world would then say, at some point, fake news threaten the country's security, and if it's not dealt with expediently, it may lead to a serious threat into any country. If you go, for example, in I don't know if it's the whole China but if you go to other countries in China, they have a way of handling social media. I know in the age, there was a time when it was switched off. The entire, like one country in Africa can't recall. So clearly, for me, it's not even about dictatorship or what, but it's about every citizen's life. Because if it's not well managed, it has a potential of culminating into a.
Is if there should be some kind of governmental regulation or policy, maybe our.
I'm trying to get there.
I mean, to turn that around a little bit, I have a real issue with this idea of regulating the internet, because I think it's impossible, actually. I really do. I mean, I can't actually see how you could regulate fake news other than to make sure that there's a very distinct verification process. As I said, for example, when you're reading something on Facebook, it is much clearer to you whether it is a verified news organization or not. I mean, in the case that you're talking about, and I think it is a really good example, I don't think that public officials themselves should be really schooled on the responsibility of social media, and it should actually be a fireable offense, end of story. I mean, if you can't control yourself and you can't actually speak on behalf of your government in a sane and rational way, you shouldn't really be on social media. I mean, I think what Donald Trump has done has been absolutely outrageous in every possible way, because he's threatened the security of the entire world on Twitter. It's not even just in America. But I mean, it is I mean, I use that one example because I mean, his account is also actually quite amusing at times. But the thing is that you have a responsibility as a minister to the people or as a government official. Step one, make it very clear that actually that is a fireable offence, that you have to speak on behalf of the government with the unified voice of your party or your government and be very clear about what it is that you're saying. You can't just go off on a piece anytime you feel like it and then say, oh, my account's been hacked, okay, which is the usual defense. I mean, Twitter accounts don't get hacked with this amount of regularity. So self-regulation, I think, is a very good starting point. We all do it, journalists do it. I mean, we have extremely strong social media guidelines. A journalist is a public official to the extent that they speak for the public or to the public, relay messages to the public. Journalists operate under very, very strict control in social media, and if they don't, they will be disciplined accordingly. So the same should apply to anybody who's speaking on behalf of a public organization. In my, that's my personal view. Regulation, I think, is something that is very, very difficult. And the moment you start wading into regulatory waters, what happens is that lots of other stuff, innocent stuff, gets in it as well, and starts suppressing freedom of speech in many ways. And I think that that's why it's a very nuanced question. It is an enormous difficulty. I think that fake news will be here to stay, but it will. I think people will become wiser to it as time goes on. That's what I think. And again, just to news is being declared fake because people don't agree with it, not because it's actually fake. So it's partisan in journalism and in sort of public discourse. Like,
let me just close my point in a second. The social media platform itself fails to bring mechanisms to deal with disinformation and fake news. The platform centers themselves. Because I think, the issue that it's unpoliced, it's unguided, it's for me, it's non-existent. There's nothing like that. It's blank there. You can police, you can guide, you can use. So it's something that we have to, if Zuckerberg or whoever is involved, there's got to be a way of holding somebody accountable. If as media were able to hold others accountable, the inventor itself must be held accountable. So there's got to be mechanisms, one way or the other. There's nothing on earth that can just go like that. It's ungoverned, it's unregulated, no policy, there's no one. Because once we allow it to be legislated by governments, then you're calling for something else. And then Prof. Antonava would say self-regulation, but there's got to be a mechanism, one way or the other. And I'm sure if you look at the manner in which and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting that you talk about the platform should have a regulated brand. So in our conversations with the social media companies, what they usually tell us is, yeah, we have a regulation, but the context keeps on changing. So what we want you to do is, if you see something hateful in your own context, flag it to us, and then we'll do it. Because if I, like the case of the MTN, so they can't come and start pulling down content in South Africa because people are using the word MTN on the content on social media. So they're saying if it's fake or it's hateful, flag it for us, and then we'll review it. But then again, the context comes into play because again, you have all these layers of satire. Is it a joke? Is it hateful? Is it fake? So it becomes then very murky waters because then you might end up, for example, in a platform like WhatsApp, like what you're talking about, it's really increasing. Content gets in there, spreads like wildfire, starts maybe in the US, ends up in Africa, goes to Asia. So the question is, like what you said, you have a platform, you say, I saw this online, and then are you responsible? Like how do you deal with such situations where I was trying to verify, put it online in my network, so that people could check it out. So am I a perpetrator? So there are very, very gray lines when it comes to regulating social content and all that. But what we're trying to do, and again, this is something that was actually mentioned yesterday by the VP of Facebook. They're saying the way to tackle fake news and hate speech is not actually reducing it; is increasing truthful news and content that is verified. Because ideally, we'll focus on on the issue of fake news, and then we'll realize, okay, something else has cropped up, or it's become we're becoming entangled into fact checking. But what he was just more truthful, reporting, more factual. We sort of build this mass that is then makes the fake sort of look like it's a small issue that people will then come around to start pointing fingers at the same.
As elsewhere, the motivations for it can be sometimes ideological and sometimes commercial. And I think, as Lisa said, the problem with regulation is that, well, it's difficult to do, and also there's the principle of freedom of speech. So I just wonder, is part of the way to combat fake news to look at chunking off the revenues that are going to fake news sites. And in the UK, there's been an initiative to get advertisers, and in particular the supply side platforms that are involved in selling programmatic advertising, to sign up to codes of practice that commit to avoiding directing revenues to fake news sites. Now, obviously, that creates problems in relation to distinguishing what is and what isn't a fake news site, and the question of who's responsible for identifying those fake news sites and labelling them. But even so, it does set a marker. An initiative of that kind would set a marker for advertisers that care about their reputation, to think about, the perils of their advertising showing up on a website that has fake news.
Thanks. I mean, you're absolutely correct about that. So the IAB internationally, Marcus here, the head of our publishing council here, the local IAB, is pushing very hard for verification of sites so that we don't have ads spoofing effectively. And I mean, you're absolutely correct about it. So there has been a very big movement to try and add it's called the ads.txt, the movement. So that basically on sell-side platforms, when you are selling advertising, advertisers can actually double check against those .txt files and make sure that they are selling to verified sites. So that is it's a check and balance that is being put in place internationally to make sure that ads are being served correctly. I mean, at one point, I think the FT actually uncovered literally about 8 months ago that something like 38% of the ad money that advertisers thought were coming to them were in actual fact being routed out to lookalike sites or to fake sites. So there's been a very, very big impetus from the big publishers and the big brands to make sure that ad environment is as sanitary as possible. So I think that will help immensely. I really, really do.
Yeah. Okay. I think you want to go first?
Hi. I just wanted to make an observation on fake news. That the more I listen to academic work about this, the more I realize that fake news is here to stay. I think we underestimate the fact that a lot of journalists have been laid off and they are now providing their services in other platforms. And therefore, the nature of fake news is becoming almost like factual, because these are people who know how to write stories. But secondly, I think the biggest problem that nations facing around the world, and why fake news is thriving, is what could be termed as collective mismemory and lack of or the temptation to try and rewrite history in order to make sense of it in the present day. I'm using that example particularly in our South African case recently with Winnie Mandela, the death of Winnie Mandela. I heard one of the presenters this morning referring to Stratcom. Now, we know a lot of things that are being said about Stratcom. It's hearsay. There is no documentation and there's no one who has done a proper research into that story, but it's becoming now part of the lexicon and of the narrative of the nation. Just simply because someone like Winnie Mandela said to an interview, "Oh, I'm surprised that these people are saying such good things about me because I think they were part of this." We all as a nation believe that she had said the said individuals were part of the spy. And there was no attempt to actually try and say, what is our history? Let's look, for example, at the structure of journalism at that time. How many publications were there and what was the nature of that publication? And even ask ourselves if it is possible, given the vibrancy of the media then, to have had 40 journalists just working for the state in that capacity. But that whole mismemory continued even for people who should know the story firsthand. Yeah. We all knew that we went through the TRC and how someone like George Bezos testified at the TRC. But the family of Winnie, who was probably there at the TRC when it was happening, completely forgot that George Bisos had delivered the very same testimony 20 years ago. So what was trending in the country was, why is he talking about it now? So I think the reason that fake news is thriving is what has to do with the collective memory of the nation, and sometimes the laziness of confronting those that narrative with facts as we know them, and the fact that we've lost a lot of journalism and this generalization of newsroom in South Africa because of all the people who covered women. There were very few people who were present in the 70s at a time where there were issues around the soccer club. So my observation is that there are a lot more problems with fake media because of that collective mismemory. Because I also think that what happened in the US, that's why it's thrived, because suddenly the head of state can reinvent geopolitics, and no one is able to come and say, but you can't be saying about this, about BRICS, because the BRICS is just 2 years, and if you look at the trade history. So I think we need to look at, what could be the role, even of government in terms of education, educating nations so that they don't become vulnerable to fake news.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I mean, the Stratcom, so now Stratcom is entered the public discourse as a catch-all phrase for journalists we don't like. Who are reporting on stuff that we don't agree with, and is being used as a slur against people completely unfairly and unnecessarily. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there was a lot of reporting done over it in the last couple of weeks, explaining to people what it meant for people who didn't understand, where the Stratcom slurs come from. But again, I mean, it's another thing that it's a catch-all. What it is actually is a hashtag. That's actually what it is, because it's a single word that represents the entire an entire spectrum of allegations, thought processes, feelings, accusations in one really handy hashtag. So now when somebody is saying something on social media, it's like, yeah, Stratcom. That's what this is. That's what we've been fed. There was somebody. Sorry, can we just go over there and just come back to you? Because Benji's been waiting. Sorry, did you want to answer?
Just two more questions, then we have to close the session.
I think this whole discussion has been fascinating. I'm Ken Thomaselli from the University of Johannesburg, but it's an encoding emphasis. Okay, what about the decoding emphasis? Why do people read so badly? And it's a loss of critical reading skills. And this goes back 30 years ago. A professor of journalism in South Africa did a study across the country of what media, journalism and media students consume. He found that journalism students didn't read newspapers, movie students didn't go to the movies, and television students didn't watch television. Linked to an incident at the South African Communication Association about 10 years ago, a well-known critical journalist with a great reputation came to the conference, had a disagreement with the president of the association, immediately left the conference and wrote an email. This was before the days of Facebook. Within an hour, 30 other top South African journalists had endorsed this person's rage based on a misunderstanding on his part. These are the journalists who were supposed to be checking the situation, the rules, the regulations, the context, before going to them and complaining. So I think there's a number of problems that we face in the classroom in humanities. Firstly, students don't read. Secondly, when they do read, they don't read systematically or deeply. They read very superficially. This then leads to instant rage when they disagree with something. The Twitter generation and all these politicians getting into trouble. No triangulation. There's no checking of sources. The fellow who arrived at the pizza gate, at the pizza shop, is now in jail for 4 years because he didn't go to the police. All the usual checks and balances and infrastructures and procedures are being short-circuited as people vent and then do the most stupid things. Now that's at the extreme level. At the reading level, it's not, people are not reading, ironically so, you know, when Black Star has these wonderful Nando type irony adverts, I wonder how they're being interpreted. The problem with Nando's advertising is that the company claimed that it was offering political commentary, which everybody enjoyed, but it wasn't selling more chicken. There's a disjunction. So irony is not part of what the new generation can detect in reading messages anymore. And so they don't write ironically, they write bluntly and then end up in jail. These are the issues I think that we need to face in the classroom. We need to get back to critical reading. How do you read a newspaper? How do you read a website? How do you detect the difference between fake and other kinds of news? And when the journalists themselves are part of that problem, okay, the techniques that you've introduced will hopefully allay some of those misunderstandings.
We do our best.
That's my conclusion on your topic.
Maybe we'll take one more, then you guys can close. I think we have one more question here.
Hello. Sorry. So I just wanted to point out that on this whole issue of revisionist history, which also happened, is that part of the difficulty is Google, what Google is able to access and index, and the fact that anything sort of pre-internet is really difficult to find, and consequently is more open and prone to abuse, where people find it difficult to verify, but it's this thing called a book. You know, people supposedly don't have access to. So that's a part of the challenge. The next point that I wanted to make is in relation to what journalism organizations or media organizations can potentially do. Now we know we've got a great organization called AppCheck. What I'm thinking is, what's the possibility of news organizations getting together and simply saying, we're going to create a new category tag on our websites, all our websites, and it's simply called fake news, and we're going to have the range of associated words with fake news. Because when you Google fake news as a concept, the stories come up on fake news, but imagine if a person Googles fake news or any synonym, and you have on the top links 10 websites, news websites that come up with the fake news section on their site, and what they're doing is they're actually performing the debunking duty of responsibility. That's power.
I think it's an absolutely excellent idea, and I think that actually, if I'm not mistaken, is there any people from EW in here by any chance? Because I think they've actually got something on their site. I was looking at it yesterday. That's excellent. It's a collection of stories on fake news. This was debunked, and I was thinking exactly the same thing. I definitely think we should be doing that. Super idea. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, there's also, just to add on that, there is also fake.org. They also do something similar where they have stories, they have pictures, and say it's just published on the state, and they give you the real picture or the real story of what actually happened. So, you can, again, but I still agree with the issue of Google indexing, where you get to a point where you can't go back any more further, so you have to go to the libraries and read and do your own hard research that people are now a bit lazy.
I think we have a gentleman waiting for an okay. Please, the last one.
I wanted to raise two particular points. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm sure as many of you can remember, at the end of last year when we had a coup that was not a coup, the reporting around that particular story actually startled me quite a bit. And the 2 points that I think contribute to the issue of fake news is that on the one end, I was quite disappointed because when you were on DSTV, when you went from channel 400 to channel 430 from BBC with the SABCs, all of that stuff, everyone was reporting the things that we as Zimbabweans were just receiving in our WhatsApp groups. You know what I mean? There wasn't any real critical reporting that was happening on the ground, despite the fact that there was actual presence of the big media houses in places like Harare and stuff like that. So I think such conditions, right? You create a situation where there's nothing else to accept but the fake news, right? And also the second issue is just the fact that I think for a lot of African countries, African leaders have been very slow to get with the program when it comes to social media, for example, right? It's not all African leaders that are like Fikile Mbalula, for example, who are very active on social media. It's only, and using the Zimbabwe case again, it's only when Emerson Mnangagwa became president that there was actually an official account for the president of Zimbabwe. And in such a situation, there are so many fake accounts for ZANU-PF, for this leader and that leader. And because your leaders haven't gone and taken that step to be on social media, to actually verify their presence, it creates a space, it creates a vacuum where anyone can go and purport to be that person. So I think, yes, we as people need to be more critical in the way that we engage with content, but at the same time, our leaders also need to do more to actually verify some of the messaging that actually then comes across.
So definitely, I totally agree. There needs to be a way that, like the way Twitter does with its blue tick, so that you know this is a verified account, as opposed to having multiple presidents. We've seen such situations in Kenya, but I think there's also a challenge because what we're realizing, like for example in Kenya, is where government works with bloggers, or like what you mentioned, defunct journalists who've left, and gone onto one side to start publishing all this type of content. These are people who have the skill, they know how to package it, and they're working for either a government or a campaign. So I think again, it depends also with the country, where you're from, how to approach government to the point where we're looking to them to direct us on social media, because they may be also the ones who are spreading these fake news. And also just to talk about what was mentioned, the students not reading and the students not participating. So it's one of the things we're trying to do is work with the universities as well. Because somebody asked me with all the issue of fake news, should we then change our curriculum? Should we then now look at how to verify, bring in this topic of verification on social media platforms? So I think it's something definitely we should be thinking about, so that students can now be thinking, I'm on this platform, how do I verify on using this?
Okay, well, thank you. That was an extremely insightful panel, and we will start our research track presentation next. Thank you.